As the company is growing, you also need to introduce clearly defined processes. And that's also the basis of, culture, communication, collaboration, everything else.
Welcome to the Agile Digital Transformation Podcast, where we explore different aspects of digital transformation and digital experience with your host, Tim Butera, Content and Community Manager at AgileDrop.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm joined today by Zeljko Plesac, Infinum Alliance Director at the digital agency Infinum. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the most common collaboration challenges and how to tackle them. And Zeljko will also tell us more about the productive platform that they use at Infinum and how it can help tackle these challenges for project managers, product managers, business leaders, etc. So, Zeljko, welcome to the show. It's great having you as our guest today. Do you want to add anything before we jump into our questions?
No, I think you did good. And thanks for the invitation and looking forward to this podcast.
Awesome. It's definitely a great topic. It's definitely one that's if it's not super relevant for everybody today, it's becoming more and more relevant for everybody who's working in the digital. And I'm glad we have you here to discuss this with us, Zeljko. And before we jump into specific challenges and the discussion there, I want to first ask you, why is it so important to have collaboration on a very high level in digital product development?
In order to provide a little bit better answer to that question, I think it's best that we, take a trip down the memory lane. So my career at Infinum started 10 years ago. And at that point in time, I was working as an Android developer here. Like, do you remember, the mobile phones that we had 10 years ago? For Android, we were working on Android 2.3. It was, the top operating system on the market, the Gingerbread. We were still supporting Frojo, and we were preparing ourselves for upgrade to Ice Cream Sandwich and to Lollipop. And at that point in time, the especially Android phones, they didn't have, the best hardware. They didn't have the best camera. The options and feature set that was provided by Android was not top of the market if you look it through today's eyes. And the complexity of the projects that we were delivering at that time was significantly, lower or simpler than the project complexity that we have today. Similar story happened also on web. So, 10 years ago, we didn't have React, we didn't have Angular. Most of the software was still deployed on physical servers, so we didn't have the cloud. And also that meant that, let's say, software which was used by everyday user, like a regular user, it wasn't too complex. We had complex software, but we were mostly talking about, enterprise level projects for which you had to buy the license and you had to install them on your desktop device. But in most cases, we're talking about, systems that were simpler if we take a close look, what's happening today on the market. Also, everything was changing on a slower pace. Like, 10 to 15 years ago, you bought the license for a product, you were using it for a couple of years, and then you upgraded the license to a newer product. Today, with continuous integration, with continuous deployment, you're pretty much deploying software or deploying new features of your product to production on a daily basis or a weekly basis. So we also have this incentive that everything is changing, rapidly on a faster pace. And with, evolving market, we now have, bigger teams who are also globalized, scattered throughout the world. And we also have the situation then that in product development, we have teams of different background, people of different background, for instance, engineering, design, development, QA, project management, and everything else. And so now we have a situation where we're developing, complex products on our larger teams, which is also generating, bigger problems, bigger complexity. And, on the other hand, it also generates more money, which is coming into IT. And for that, we need to have some, ground basis how to organize those teams in order so they can deliver the best product to the market. And I would say that the basis of collaboration in those type of teams is obviously the communication. And the communication needs to be presented and well defined through horizontal level, so that everybody who is a part of the team, and also on the vertical level, so that people who are stakeholders or who are CEOs, management, or something like that, that they have full overview of the product, of the state of the product that it currently is, and what's happening with everything. That's just the way that the stuff is operating today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that definitely everything that you've pointed out right now has been kind of highlighted and taken to new heights in the past 3 years, right? We've seen an increase in complexity, seen an increase in the speed of innovation and everything there. So, and you mentioned that communication is one of the key things today in digital product development. And I'm guessing that this is also one of the biggest challenges in product development today. And I'm wondering which are the other most common and most frequent ones besides communication?
Yeah, so communication is obviously the most important one. And one of the biggest problems that they have with communication is that you can learn how to express yourselves a little bit better, but communication is something that it's a natural talent. If you want to communicate better with everybody else, it's something that has to come naturally from the inside. Together with communication, I would say that one of the most important challenges that we also have is from the cultural perspective. Today, we are working in teams which are distributed throughout the world. In most cases, companies from Central Europe or from this part of the world are cooperating with clients which are either from Western Europe or from US. And you have some communication, or to be more precise, you have some cultural differences that you need to take into consideration. For instance, people who are in US they have better communicational skills, better sales skills. They are better in chit chat, small talk, and stuff like that. But on the other hand, they are sometimes overly optimistic about everything what they are communicating. And with us in Europe, we are a little bit more conservative, a little bit more pessimistic, maybe even a little bit closed or not so verbal in our communication. And those are some of the cultural changes that you need to take into consideration when you are collaborating on a bigger project. I would also say that we need to take into consideration the matter of transparency. That's something what's especially important in bigger corporations or bigger enterprises, because usually the communication works in a way that vertically on each level, let's say 10 to 15% of communication is lost, either because somebody is trying to paint a different picture, or they believe that some of the information are not important for the higher levels, and you have problems with transparently communicating all the problems that are happening on the project. And of course, vertical is just one thing. You also need to take into consideration that whenever you have people from different companies collaborating on a project, there's always some level of information that gets lost in the communication between two partners in the same process. So yeah, those are some of the most important problems. I would say that everything boils down, to communication culture. But you also have to understand that, especially today in current market situations, it's also really important that everybody who is collaborating on a product or product development, they need to share the product vision, which somebody has defined for the product they are developing. And they need to understand that everything what they are delivering or everything what they're working for that project, it needs to deliver some business value to the stakeholders or to the users or the project itself. If you're just working something on a product or introducing new features that in the end nobody will benefit of, in the end this will lead to problems with user retention, with passion that your users are sharing about your product, and so on.
I think you really pinpointed it just before when you said everything boils down to communication, right? Because almost everything that we talked about under this question can be classified as some kind or another communication issue, right? If people working on the product are misunderstanding the product's business value, it's likely because the business value has been miscommunicated or hasn't been properly communicated.
That's right.
And in a way, collaboration is almost a one-to-one equivalent of communication, right? I mean, you can't collaborate without communicating. So it's definitely, we're definitely seeing this now, and it's no surprise that we spoke so heavily about communication, since it's kind of the basis for working together, especially across cultures, especially since we mentioned before the past 3 years the rise of globally distributed teams, which also means, I don't know, potential language differences, culture differences that you also spoke about. And then you
That's
also
right.
have you have culture differences, and then you have company culture differences, right? And you have to take both into account.
Definitely. Like, I would say that each company or each startup, it's a living being, and it has its own behavior, its own culture, and in some cases, two companies can collaborate on the product or a project and deliver great value. And on the other hand, if you have some misalignment from the culture perspective, in the end, the product can be good. It can bring some additional business value, but the whole process of development will not be good for both of the sides. There will always be some problems between them.
Yeah, because right now, I mean, the main focus of our discussion today is also optimizing this process of collaboration, not just the final product.
That's right.
And so in this line, what can managers and leaders do to address and tackle these challenges that we've pinpointed?
The first thing that everybody needs to take into consideration is that you need to start with yourself. You need to lead by example, and if you want to introduce some changes regarding the communication or the whole culture that you have in your company, you need to start with yourself, and you need to transparently, let's say like that, transparently and directly communicate those changes and those problems that you're trying to solve to everybody else. You can't expect that your peers or your subordinates will work on their communication and their culture and transparency and everything else if you don't do that on the management level. Like, I'm not saying here that you need to be radically transparent, that all of the information which is flowing inside the company has to be visible to everybody. There's always something that's maybe better if it's just shared between smaller group of peers. Maybe you will be even faster, or will be able to deliver something to production with a faster pace and maybe with a better quality. But in general, the communication flow that you have in your company should be transparent, direct, honest, and it should start at the top, and then it should spill over to all of the verticals that you have in your company. As already mentioned, usually you have those problems that when you are reporting something to upper levels, that some information tends to be missing. And that's usually in cases when something goes wrong, when you have some problems, when you have, for instance, problems with delivery, when you have problems with the quality of the product that you're pushing. And it's just human nature. It's easier to report that everything is okay and maybe try to figure out, on your own how you're going to resolve the issues that you have. But in most cases, it would be better and easier for everybody if just those problems get communicated vertically, even to the highest levels, and then you can have the discussion how you're gonna resolve those issues. Together with that, I would also say that as the company is growing, you also need to introduce clearly defined processes, and that's also the basis of culture, communication, collaboration, everything else. I would say, from the developer's perspective, nobody likes processes because they are limiting. They are introducing some additional overhead. But if you want to scale your agency or your SaaS business from 10 to 50 or 100 people, or on the other hand, if you want to scale the user base that you have, you need to have some clear vision what everybody in your company is doing. You need to have defined processes, the way of working, both for internal stuff and both for the external collaboration or communication that you have with your clients. And based on that also in the end should lead with some direct and fast reporting between all of the verticals, because I would say as the company is growing, as you have bigger number of people, as you're introducing, more and more processes, you tend to get slower in your decision making, and you need to invest more effort, more time, and more money to respond to everything that's happening on the market. And in order to avoid those type of problems, you need to have some, direct reporting, clear reporting, reporting only the information that are needed, because in the other hand, you have the information overflow, and you need to be straight. Like there's no point in lying or updating your reports in a way that everything looks, shiny and perfect, but then down the line, you will have problems because you were pretty much, covering your eyes and postponing the decisions that could somehow make a bigger or major impact on the project.
Yeah, if you're not gonna do reporting transparently, then you might as well not do it, right? Because this, if I understand correctly, reporting is what will kind of connect all of these different layers from management to the developers. And it's also, you pointed out several times now that one of the biggest issues here is that a lot of information potentially gets lost as you move through these layers, and proper reporting will make sure that as little as possible of this lost information actually gets lost.
That's right. Like, you need to understand that somebody needs to invest the time into reading all of the reports, into analyzing the data, and into making some decisions on a bigger level, what to do based on those reports. And as you are going higher and higher on a vertical level, this means that you need to make bigger decisions who are gonna have more impact on the general product or your company. The level of failure or the cost of failed decisions or wrongly made decision is increasing. And I'm a strong proponent of that either you do reports in correct way, that you are transparent, direct, short to the point, and that you are not, painting a different picture. Those reports are okay, but if you're not doing it like that, then it just doesn't make any sense for anybody who is involved into the process. But still, I believe that you need to have some reports, because without them, you tend to get lost a little bit. Maybe you can misinterpret some of the information that you have. Maybe you have started to divert from the product vision that you would like to have. Maybe you have some problems with the team, with the culture, with everything else. And on the other hand, I think that also everybody needs to be accountable for the work they are delivering. And pretty much with this, you are taking ownership of something that you're in charge with.
That was really, really well said. A great point here. And I think that this is the right place to ask you if there are any special considerations if you're collaborating across multiple teams, for example, as when a company partners with a digital agency or more digital agencies with some kind of staff augmentation or outsourcing type of partnership versus completely in-house product development process. What's the situation here?
Yeah, I would say there are some differences or problems that you need to take into consideration. Like, every time when you are kicking off the partnership with somebody who is outside of your company, it can be a smaller startup, it can be a freelancer, it can be a bigger agency like ours. You're introducing another partner in the story who does not necessarily share the same vision as you share, who does not necessarily have the same organizational structure. They don't have the same communication guidelines. They have different culture. They have different tech stack. And you are introducing, something that is a little bit different or strange to the organizational process that you currently have in place. In some cases, that can bring a lot of problems because if there are some misalignment regarding the vision, regarding the delivery, regarding the quality, regarding the communication, it can tend to it pretty much results in a situation where one partner is not happy with the another one, which also in the end means that the final product will be of lesser quality. But I would also say that in most cases, your company, your product, it can benefit from somebody who is outside, who has a different approach, who has a different opinion about it, because they can help you think about the problem in a different way. They can help you maybe have a different approach or a different opinion about the road that you are taking. Maybe they're going to help you with update the vision that you have with the product, and they can bring a lot of new stuff to the table.
So it can be a kind of double-edged sword. It has its upsides and its
Yeah,
downsides. Yeah.
yeah. So it really depends. I would say it depends on a case by case basis.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on how your company is stable and what's the level of engagement that your company is investing into communicating and collaborating with somebody who is external. And it also goes vice versa. There are some common pitfalls that you need to avoid, but I would say that in most cases, at least at some point in time, it's really beneficial if you can introduce at least somebody who is external to an aspect of your product development. It doesn't have to be purely on development level. It can be maybe you can outsource, finances,
Mm-hmm.
legal, or HR or something like that. It can be beneficial for all the parts in your company.
We're definitely seeing this kind of become a trend right now rather than the exception to the norm.
Yeah, with everything that's happened on the market in the last 3 or 4 years,
Mm-hmm.
with Corona, with work from home, with globalization and distributed teams, I think that at the moment we are, this is, I would say, maybe the first time in the human civilization that we have the necessary tools, which can help us manage and organize, distributed teams who are throughout the world without any impact on the delivery on
Mm-hmm.
time or something like that. It's a really interesting time to live. And of course, companies are opening more and more. People can work from different locations. For instance, I would say that in 2017 or 2019, even in Slovenia, it was really hard to find an agency. Let's maybe even upscale the story a little bit. Let's talk about bigger enterprises, like banks, insurance companies, or, companies that employ 5,000 people, something like that. It was really hard to find somebody who was willing to engage with you if you were living 500 kilometers from the office. Those are the situations that today are, I would say, way of the past. Although there are some trends on the market that bigger corporations and enterprises are talking about, return to office. But I would say that in most cases, this will mean that you will be physically in your office, 3 or 4 days or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But there will still be some portion of time that you will invest from some remote location. And also, you need to take into consideration that with distributed teams, this can also have a positive financial impact on the product, because there's always ways to optimize the costs by maybe either outsourcing a smaller portion of your work to a company who can provide you with better rates, or maybe you can engage with people who are cheaper on the market.
Mm-hmm.
But it also goes vice versa. This is the perfect situation. For instance, if you're working in, let's say, from Slovenia, that you can really get high salaries by just working for some company who is working from US or from Western Europe.
Yeah, definitely. Remote and hybrid work have definitely had a huge impact
For
in
sure.
all contexts. But one thing that I still haven't yet asked you, Zeljko, and I want to take a few minutes to discuss this, the role of product management tools and what these can do to help
Mm-hmm.
resolve the challenges and kind of streamline everything that we've talked about today.
Yeah. So let's say, if we were talking about the situation, 10 or 15 years ago, you mostly had the situations where everybody who was collaborating on a product were physically in the same room
Mm-hmm.
or distributed, through a couple of rooms, but in the same office. And you had product managers who could collaborate, communicate with people on a daily basis, resolve some problems, issues, and get the update about the product. With globalization and everything else, what's happening now, you need to use some product management tools in order to provide you with necessary tool belts so you can better lead your team and better resolve the products or better resolve the problems that you're trying to achieve. So what role they can play? For sure, they can provide you with a better visibility of the current state or the current situation your product is. You can get better insight into who's working on the product, how many hours did they invest in the product, what tasks are they working on, what's been resolved, what's ready to production. If you have support for finances, you can also see the level of investment that the current feature has. Are you profitable or not? So it gets you better visibility and insight into the sheer number of information that you can gather from your company or from your product. The thing that I also like, which is a little bit connected to the whole story about communication and everything else, that you can also check or get a better grasp of the accountability of a certain part of your product. Usually, when you are developing, let's say, bigger products where you have 50, 60, or maybe even 1,000 people, the accountability tends to get a little bit lost because as you have more people collaborating on the product, it's always easier to hide it behind somebody else. But with product management tools, you can immediately see, okay, for our product, Infinum is delivering the mobile application. And inside that mobile application, they need API or documentation from our side, from the client side. And after that, they can deliver the working product, which will have those and those features in that time plan. And they are in charge of that. And then if something goes wrong, you can see, what's happening where. And final thing that I wanted to mention here is that, especially today with, let's say, uncertainties on the market that we have, it's really important to act as fast as possible on everything what's happening on the market. So if you see that, a feature you have delivered or a feature in which you have invested a lot of money and resources is not performing in a way that you're expecting of it, that you immediately act and try to introduce some changes or improve the quality or maybe improve UX or UI, something like that. But what would be even better is if you could somehow make a forecast before even starting to code on that feature, what's going to happen in production. And with machine learning, with AI, with just taking into consideration a bunch of different stuff that's happening on the project, you can try to forecast at least something. You can try to forecast: is the time plan that you have designed for the product, is it still okay? Will we miss some deadline down the road or not? Will we deliver everything that was agreed upon? From the financial perspective, will this project be profitable for us? Are we generating enough revenue from our clients or from our users? Is our company on good legs? Like, do we have enough money maybe to invest into paychecks, into salaries, into new office equipment? And that's something that's really important if you want to, on one hand, scale the company, on the other hand, work on the maybe, let's say, improve the effectiveness that you have in your company or utilization, something like that. It can help you deliver on the promise that you've made both to your stakeholders, users, and finally, in the end, also to your employees.
And you also have your own tool at Infinum, right? Productive. Can you tell us more about that? And also maybe, I assume that a lot of listeners will be familiar with platforms such as Jira, and I'm wondering how Productive compares to something like that, something well-known.
Yeah, so at first, to be 100% transparent and honest, since we're talking about communication, Productive is a separate company. It's a spin-off from Infinum that was started 7 or 8 years ago. Story about Productive: it started at Infinum because we were trying to resolve some issues that we have with other tools that were on the market. So Productive is now a company which has 70 or 80 employees. they are growing with a nice pace, and they are operating on a worldwide market. So what's the advantage, let's say, of Productive over Jira or some other project management tools? So I have to say, at least from the developer perspective, Jira tends to get a lot of negative feedback or negative passion from the developers, because most of the comments go in a way that it's too big, it's too complex, it's hard to manage, and it introduces a lot of overhead which could potentially be used for some other purposes. For instance, maybe you could invest that time into development or something like that. Productive is still quite easy to use. It's best suited for smaller digital agencies or for smaller digital products or for smaller startups. And it can accommodate a lot of different use cases. So for developers, you have project management features like, tasks, boards, a tool for entering time entries and stuff like that. For business development, you have the full sales pipeline. So you can check, what's happening with the lead, what's happening with the finances on the lead. For project managers, you have the option to manage the project, the tasks, and everything else. Also to manage the budgets on the project. For financial perspective, you have the full support for creating the invoices. And let's say for management with different reports, you can really drill down what's happening with your company, what's happening with the projects, what's happening with the finances, with everything else. And you could get a little bit better grasp about, are we still on the right track? Are we still on the wrong track? And with that drilling down, you can also improve the transparency that you have in your company. Pretty much everybody has, they can get a little bit better insight into some of the information which could be lost, during the whole reporting stuff that we mentioned before.
Well, Zeljko, this has been a great conversation, and I'm sure that it will also be very valuable to everybody listening right now. Just before we wrap it up and jump off the call, if listeners would like to reach out to you, learn more about you, or learn more about Infinum, where would you point them to?
Yeah, so regarding Infinum, I would say that the best source of information is our webpage, www.infinum.com. We're also quite present on all the social networks. You can follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I also believe that we have a TikTok account, so for younger listeners. We're also quite present on the meetup scene here in Ljubljana, in Slovenia. We regularly organize meetups in our office, from Android meetup to design talks that we had just 2 weeks ago. And our office is here in Technology Park. So if you're ever passing by, you can always drop us a visit, and we're more than happy to have a chat. And me personally, I'm also available on most of the social media. I would say that if you want to reach out to me, probably it's best that you drop me a DM on LinkedIn, or maybe reach out to me over Twitter. You can also always drop me an email or something like that. But I'm also always available for everything.
Okay, great. We'll make sure to link everything in the show notes. And Zeljko, thanks again for joining us today. It's been great discussing this with you.
Thanks once again for the invite. It was a pleasure.
Likewise. And to our listeners, that's all for this episode. Have a great day, everyone, and stay safe.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to check out our other episodes, you can find all of them at agiledrop.com/podcast, as well as on all the most popular podcasting platforms. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and don't forget to share the podcast with your friends and colleagues.